Good evening and welcome to Aware on the Air for the 16th week of 2015. Our program is presented by members and friends of Aware, a local peace group. Aware is an acronym for Anti-War, Anti-Racism Effort. I'm Carl Estabrook. Aware is an association of residents of Champaign-Urbana who oppose the U.S. government's war-making. Most Americans are unaware that President Obama is making war in eight countries around the world: Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Pakistan, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and the Philippines, in violation of the UN Charter, which forbids the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state without the authorization of the UN Security Council. Most Americans are also unaware that President Obama is sending American death squads, we call them Special Operations Forces, into more than 100 countries around the world, where their operations include kidnapping, we call it rendition, torture, and murder. Most Americans are unaware that he is conducting the most extreme terrorist campaign of modern times, a secret series of murders by drone, which has already killed thousands, including American citizens and hundreds of children. Most Americans are unaware that President Obama is recklessly provoking war with Russia and Ukraine, where a U.S. proxy government has already killed thousands, more than U.S. client Israel killed in Gaza last year. Why has Obama, who was elected in part because of Americans' opposition to George Bush's dumb wars, as he called them, why has he outdone Bush in belligerence and expanded his wars in Europe, Asia, and Africa? The wars are not in the interest of the vast majority of Americans, who forego government services and are taxed to pay for them, to the point that the U.S. is the most unequal developed country and is becoming more so at an increasing rate, unequal in terms of the amount of wealth owned by individuals in the country. But the wars are in the interest of a very few Americans, the very rich, the 1%, who profit enormously from the U.S. control of the world economy. In the years after the Second World War, from which the U.S. emerged as the only generally undamaged major country, George Kennan, the leading U.S. foreign policy planner, wrote that to maintain, quote, the position of disparity, close quote, that separated America's enormous wealth from the poverty of the rest of the world, we should cease to talk about vague and unreal objectives such as human rights, the raising of living standards, and democratization, and we must deal in straight power concepts, close quote. That was conscious U.S. planning at the end of the Second World War, and indeed all administrations since have followed it. There were two interconnected areas for the application of those power concepts: the Mideast and Eurasia, and they were connected by world energy supplies, gas and oil, which the U.S. government intended to control. About 75% of the world's people live in Eurasia, which also has 3/4 of the world's known energy resources. And U.S. control over energy flows gives it leverage over our economic rivals from Germany to China. Control of, not just access to, Mideast gas and oil was what the U.S. demanded, and our government has been willing to kill a lot of people to ensure it. Wars conducted by U.S. presidents have killed, wounded, and made homeless well over 20 million human beings in the last 50 years, mostly civilians. Obama was elected on a platform of hope and change, but he's brought little hope and almost no change to U.S. war policy, except perhaps to lie more successfully about what he was doing than George Bush did. His policies are not different, but even more murderous. It's no wonder that the U.S. is hated around the world in the era of the Bush-Obama wars. Champaign-Urbana Aware recommends that you contact the President and our representatives in Congress and tell them to stop killing people around the world and to bring all U.S. troops home. The Aware web page and Facebook page have email addresses and phone numbers for President Obama, Senator Dick Durbin, Senator Mark Kirk, and Representative Rodney Davis. The Obama administration are today committing murder around the world, but pretending that they aren't, in order to mislead the only enemy that they really fear, the American people, who drove two presidents from office during the Vietnam War. The government is helped in this deception by a compliant, big business-run media, so Americans know far less about what's going on than citizens of other countries. Tonight, we'll try to give a better account with commentaries by Ron Zook, Karen Aram, and David Johnson. And we'll start with Ron Zook, Austerity, Blues, and Reds. Ron?
Yes. I want to talk about some instances of austerity programs that are being recommended and to some degree implemented in a couple of hotspots around the globe, especially Greece and Canada, the province of Quebec in particular, and try to avoid as long as possible commenting on the American domestic horse race. That's going to go on, be the main thing in the news, I suppose, for the next 18 months, and I'm sick of it already. Anyway, apart from my personal problems, in Greece, the big investors are still trying to impose upon Greece a austerity program. The government, Syriza government, was elected to oppose that and to try to get some relief for the ordinary people of Greece. The complaints have started to appear about, in the American press, about what the new Greek government is doing. In the Wall Street Journal, we read that someone is complaining that the Greeks are now like a taxi driver who keeps asking for more money all the time. And the same thing is happening here in this country, of course, with respect to Ukraine. The Kiev government is asking for more and more money and weapons from the USA. And now Iraq has chimed in. Their representative is in Washington, and he wants more billions to stabilize that country under government and ultimately American control. So people in Quebec in particular, we're not hearing much about it, are complaining, demonstrating against the students, especially in Quebec City, Montreal, against the austerity program that's being imposed there by the conservative government of Stephen Harper and the neoliberal economic policies that are being proposed there, taking away a lot of the money that was used to support the educational system. So the students there are finding that a lot of their support is being withdrawn. They're going deeper into debt, as Americans find themselves doing. And it's interesting that this is getting reflected even locally. Two letters in the local paper yesterday about the situation. One headed "Student Loan Debt, Big Economic Drag," which was very interesting, I think, and right on the point. And one headed "Governor Cutting Critical Programs," about a woman who has a handicapped child, and all of the social support programs that were available are being cut and lost. Well, I've been jumping around among a number of different points, but they all have the theme of where's the money going if it's not available for these human programs that supporting people in what they need, and is instead being deflected to military spending and to repaying the big investors. In Ukraine again, the Kiev government continues to unravel and discredit itself. It's amazing what's going on there. And the situation there is, I think, going to be reflected here, even in Illinois itself. So there are a number of other points that I want to mention, again, without becoming too incoherent. The passing of Günter Grass, the German novelist, writer, who died at age 87 recently, supported the SPD, the Social Democratic Party in Germany, for a number of years, and wrote some very interesting things. So with that blast of scattershot, I'll stop for now.
Thank you, Ron. We'll go around the panel here, make some comments, and then go back through and make comments on what's been said so far in roughly the same order. Right now, we'll pivot to Asia with Karen Aram.
Okay, well, I've talked a lot about railroads over the past year and a half, I know, ad nauseum. But when I did start talking about the railroads, it was in respect to Thailand and my wondering why all the uprisings and then eventually the coup took place, if it had anything to do with the contract that the former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra had given to China to build the railroad. And it was difficult to do the research because there wasn't a lot of material out there. I would do Google searches, and the material I found tended to be more of a technical nature, not political. And I did discover that, yes, as soon as the revolution took place, it wasn't a revolution, it was a coup d'etat, military coup on the part of the Thai military. And they did practically the first thing they did was to cancel the contract with China over the railroad. And my thinking at the time was that the U.S. was somehow behind that because a railroad from Kunming in China all the way through Thailand could then go all the way to Singapore. And that is something the U.S. definitely probably would not want, given their policy of containment of China. And recently I've discovered that the Thai government, the military illegal government, they have since then signed a contract with China to build that railroad. That took place as of January. And this is important. There are also, of course, there's also a lot of business interest going on. Now, there is a lot of anti-Americanism going on in Thailand right now, too, interesting enough. I'm not sure it's all for the right reason. A lot of the anti-Americanism is a result of the U.S. verbally saying they were going to halt aid for military weapons, according to our laws, which, of course, did not take place. It's my understanding we continued to supply them with weapons. But the Thais in the street just found that rather offensive. Also, some people felt that, oh yes, the U.S. supported Thaksin, which they may have initially, but they certainly didn't when he offered universal health care, when he offered microfinancing to the poor, and then in his efforts, I mean, he's not a good guy necessarily. He's a multimillionaire. Yes, he's corrupt, and I do believe he was probably supported by the U.S. for various reasons. However, I'm sure, like a lot of our allies in the past who we supported, when he did these things, like giving that contract to China, I'm sure that was, tantamount to, a betrayal. But they have gone ahead with that railroad contract, and now the focus is on Laos. Laos, which is a landlocked nation, and it was to their detriment in the past, is now considered a link-up nation. They have 5 different nations. I mean, they've got Burma, they've got China, they've got Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, all surrounding them. And the focus now is on the railroad going through Laos, and it looks, right now, it looks pretty good from a Chinese standpoint. It looks like it's going to happen. And this has far more than even just the railroad situation, the impact. It's going to bring a lot of progress to these nations, as well as it gives, it's very beneficial to China because they can deliver their goods and services without having to go through the shipping of the Malacca Straits. And the Malacca Straits are to that area what the Panama Canal is to us here, what the Suez Canal was at one time, and probably still is, and with U.S. military bases all around Asia in our effort to contain China. The fear is if they ever were able to control the Malacca Straits, they would cut off oil imports to China, and I think we know from history what happens when you cut off someone's oil imports. You completely halt all manufacturing, you halt all industry. So it's a very serious situation, but the railroad, they're calling it the Silk Road, and interesting enough now is that when I do a Google research, I'm inundated with material and information now. It's out there, everyone knows, everyone's talking about it. I mean, we know Pepe Escobar has been talking about it. We know that RT has been talking about it. But I'm coming across so many other people focusing on it. They're probably going to be going through Tibet and Mount Everest. That's one of the things they're looking at. But Laos is key. And while I think they have an MOU, that's a memorandum of understanding, maybe with Laos, but they don't have a contract yet. But they're building other things like shopping malls and things like that. But it will be other things that they will be doing. Now, Laos is important because Laos will act as I'm not sure what the word is, sort of a conduit to Vietnam. Vietnam and Laos are very close. We know that. After the Pathet Lao took over in Laos, they continue their relationship with Vietnam and Russia. And Cambodia is the other nation that China would like to have. Besides the railroads, you have the hydroelectric power dams that are being built that neither Vietnam or Cambodia want because it will impact on their fisheries industry. But China and Laos and Thailand want it because it's beneficial to them, because they want the power that will be coming, and especially Thailand. They want that power. Burma's not looking so good because when they ended their contract with China, I mean, you have to admit China doesn't have a good reputation in Burma because over all these years when the rest of the world had, well, not all the rest of the world, but when we had sanctions against doing business in Burma, China continued to use Burma as their playground, as they say. And they did business with the military junta, and so they don't have the best reputation there. But it's so unstable in Burma that they would have liked to have had that opening to the Bay of Bengal, but they can live without it as long as they get Laos. Now, there is fear on some parts that Malaysia, because the rail would go through Laos, it would go through Thailand, it would go through Malaysia on down to Singapore. If there are any color revolutions, as they call it, in Malaysia, which evidently there is some concern that could occur, evidently there have been rumblings I'm not familiar with, that could put a whammy in it. Cambodia is another reason why Cambodia is important, but since China doesn't have the best relations with Cambodia at the moment, the Hun Sen government, who was propped up very close to Vietnam. Cambodia is rich in iron ore, okay? 58% iron. In other words, it's the richest iron ore, evidently, in that whole region. So it's also very important, the mines, etc. So what is taking place now is, and Mongolia. China is probably going to be doing a rail through Mongolia. While contracts aren't signed for all of this, and anything could happen, and they may not get Cambodia or Vietnam, but it's looking like they're going to get Laos, and that's going to be very important to China, to their future and to their progress. One of the things that some people have talked about, and I agree with them, that it would be so much better if, say, Thailand, if the government and the Laotian government, if they were using public financing then for these railroads, or if they were publicly owned rather than privatizing them. That goes without saying, there's no question. And it's true that a lot of people complain and say, oh, well, we're ruining the cultures of these people. Well, we already did that. I'm sorry. When you've got a Starbucks and a McDonald's on every corner in Vientiane, which I understand they have now, when you've dropped bombs, that was one of my questions. I've had a lot of discussion with people in Southeast Asia late on this, is who's going to clean up the mines in Cambodia? Who's going to clean up the bombs that are still in Laos? So I keep thinking that while we know that development isn't always the most positive thing, if it indebts a nation, I'm not sure China's going to create any more issues or problems than what the U.S. has when we indebt nations with loans. But either way, as I've always pointed out, China uses a pen and a checkbook. They don't use bombs. And with our history of bombing these nations in the past and what we're doing in the Middle East today, I'm sorry, I would prefer the railroad. I would prefer the progress. I would prefer the development that is currently taking place. That will bring jobs, that will bring prosperity and uplift many of the people in these nations.
Thank you very much, Karen. You're watching Aware on the Air. We're talking about the things the United States is doing around the world in support of its war policy, the long-time policy of the United States to control the world economy. And we'll go now to David Johnson.
Okay. Well, today I'd like to talk about, it's a reoccurring theme, I admit, basically why you should not believe the corporate media. I mean, and let's define the corporate media. That is CNN, Fox, ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS, NPR. These are all corporate funded, and they serve a particular agenda. And it's not in the best interests of the average American, the majority of the American, I should say. It's strange because the corporate media in this country, I mean, it's almost resembles of what exists in a one-party dictatorship. And in fact, I guess, you know, in some ways, we are kind of in a one-party dictatorship with a smiley face. It's subtle in a lot of ways, but other ways it's evident. And one thing that's interesting is whenever a situation like this occurs, you know, with the media in a one-party state, it's basically a one-party state with two wings, the Democrats and Republican Party. It's basically the choice, like in Moon over Parador, between Sims Red and Sims Blue, which was the face of the dictator, one shaded in red, one shaded in blue, and you had to argue over which color of Sims you wanted to vote for. But in effect, we're voting for the same thing. In any case, like for instance, chronicled in George Orwell's famous novel 1984, once this sort of a situation occurs with the media reporting the typical lies and propaganda, it gets eventually to a point to where it's almost like a humorous you know, fantasy, unreality. And I think some of the things I've been seeing lately are you know, so out of touch with reality, they're almost humorous. Case in point is Hillary Clinton's launching of her new presidential campaign, and she's already running commercials. I saw one of these commercials yesterday, and it was like, are you kidding me? What planet are you living on? What planet do you think we're living on? I guess that would be the way to phrase this. I mean, if you watch this commercial and you know nothing about Hillary Clinton's record, you would think that she was probably, you know, she's going to be the real champion for the American people. When in fact, she's been, her whole career, she's done nothing but to hurt the American people and represent corporate America. Another case in point is this recent big publicity blitz going on to try to convince people to stand out of the way, basically the voters, to allow President Obama to get this fast-track authority to pass this Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement, which basically, if he gets that authority, there'll be no discussion or no vote in the U.S. Congress or Senate. Nothing of the agreement can be amended or changed, and whatever, it'll just be decided on by President Obama, yay or nay, which of course he's going to say yay. And what this agreement's going to do is it's going to make things even worse in this country. It's going to basically create more corporate profits and, more importantly, more corporate power at our expense. I mean, this trade agreement, if it passes, it's going to be a real threat to our democracy, to our sovereignty, not just at the national level, but at the state and local level as well. This agreement, if it becomes law, is going to cause loss of more American jobs, and it's going to be targeting the higher paid and halfway well-paying jobs that are going to be lost, and it's also going to cause prescription drug prices to increase. It's going to prevent any kind of future Medicare for all healthcare system. It's going to weaken almost to the point of non-existence our environmental, food safety, labor, work safety laws, to where any kind of local law passed for any kind of that's decided either by elected officials or even by citizens' referendums will be able to be overturned if a corporation challenges these laws in a basically these tribunals, trade tribunals that are staffed by corporate attorneys that are totally in secret, and that there's no ability to appeal it. So I mean, this is really horrible. We don't want this. We're going totally in the wrong direction here. This has to stop. We have to turn this ship around and start heading in the right direction, and we're not going to be doing it by just doing the same things we've been doing over and over again in the past. If people out there think that they're going to make change for the better to continue voting for these same candidates that are financed by corporate contributions in both the Democrat and Republican Party, I'm sorry. It's just going to make things worse if you continue giving them their support. And we've got to make changes. This is critical. The fate of the world is at stake here, and this is no exaggeration. We must stop. We got to start doing our own independent political actions, both inside the established parties, the Democrats and Republicans, and outside. We need to do both, in particular outside the both political parties. But the inside track has to also be worked. But nevertheless, what has to happen is we have to stop voting for anybody who receives corporate money. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, that's impossible in the system, but this is what's got to happen. If a candidate takes corporate money, they're compromised. They're not going to represent the people. They're going to represent those who they receive the money from. He who pays the piper calls the tune. And this is what's been happening, why our standard of living has fallen in the last 30 years, why environmental destruction has increased exponentially in the last 30 years, and why there's more and more war, more and more deaths and dismemberment from wars in the last 30 years is because the corporations have the power and the people have been disenfranchised. And we need to change that, and we need to start going in the right direction and stop going in the wrong direction.
Thank you very much, David. You're watching Aware on the Air, where we criticize the ongoing and consistent U.S. policy of war around the world and the interests that stand behind that war, which we were just hearing about from David. We'll turn now to Michael Bai.
Thank you, Carl. All right. I'd like to draw your attention to the funeral of Walter Scott, which was held over the weekend in South Carolina. To remind you real quick, Walter Scott is a black man who fled a traffic stop and was fatally shot in the back by the police officer Michael Slager. The Black Lives Movement in Charleston commented on the event as, or the Black Lives Movement leader Muhyiddin Baha commented on the movement with, "The situation down here is getting tense. It's a disorientation on parts of the people and then a reluctance on the part of the government to be responsive to the demands of the people. Black Lives Matter, Charleston in particular, and our request for a citizens review board, we would also like to push for that subpoena power." We see that there's an increasing incitement in the people going on, and that in this group of people in Black Lives Matter, reactions are still peaceful and are still rational, but there might also be other reactions by black people or by concerned members possible. And to explain that further, I'd like to point to the person Malcolm X, whose biography is explained in Cohn's book, Martin and Malcolm in America. To recall what Malcolm X experienced, his parents were shot by white radicals, and he was born as a result of a rape by a white man. And as a result of that, he showed hate for the white race. He advocated movements against white people to who would be the constant enemy of any black persons. And he started to advocate a civil war between white and black people, essentially. So why I'm showing this? If we provoke the results of the continuous police violence and general violence against different races, against other people, only provokes new aggressions and other violence. And the only consequence or possibility to stop that is a disarmament and a re-education of the police. If we militarize or provide new weapons to the police, that just doesn't provide them with new possibilities to actually ensure our security, but in the end infringes our security or that of minority groups. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. That's very important questions there. We're going to turn now in this part of the program to some comments on what's been said so far, and we'll go around the table in the same way. So we'll start with you, Ron.
Well, I wanted to ask David, do you see any prospect of the rebirth of the Occupy movement this spring? People becoming more aware of what's going on, and what are the prospects of a significant uprising? We're seeing it already in Canada among the Quebec students. Not a lot is being said about that here, in part because everyone there is speaking French, I think.
And we don't understand them.
Right. And it takes some effort to get that into the media here and to talk about what the issues are. So the little symbols have reappeared squarely in the red, which I'm wearing here, which first came to light 2 or 3 years ago. And is there a possibility of igniting a general movement along these lines? The Bard College people in New York are agitating for repudiating student loan debt and so on. And what do you see in the future on that theme?
Well, Ron, I would love to see an emergence of the Occupy movement. I mean, you know, as you pointed out, there's all sorts of things going on all over the country. I mean, on different issues that are all important. I mean, everything from the murdering of unarmed citizens, in particular African Americans, by the police, to you know, various activities, you know, against protesting against student loan debt, and here in Illinois against the new governor who was elected because the previous governor, Democratic governor, was so horrible that people either didn't vote for him or voted for Rauner just as to punish the previous governor because of his anti-worker citizen policies. So I mean, again, we get back to the same thing about you know, where it seems like you know, just voting for Democrats isn't getting the job. Just voting for any Democrat is not just any and all Democrats is not getting the job done. So I'd love to see a reemergence of the Occupy movement. There's all these scattered different things going on around the country, and you never know. I mean, it seems like it always takes some kind of catalyst, you know, to make this happen. And what that'll be, your guess is as good as mine. But I think it's, you know, unfortunately, I think things are going to get worse and worse, and it's just going to be a matter of time. And when that happens, I think it's going to be a matter of necessity that all these different, you know, groups and issues around the country that really we're all facing to one degree or another actually unite and have joint actions.
The disputes in the protests in Quebec, largely college students and others, not exclusively by any means, and connecting questions of austerity with questions closer to home for university students. In this country, and it's been hardly reported, I mean, very few people know about what you were talking about there, Ron. In this country, in fact, on a number of college campuses this spring, there have been rather significant movements against fossil fuel, in favor of divestment of college investments in fossil fuels. Elite colleges, as well as others across the country, once again, not much reported. I mean, there's
Yale and then maybe Harvard.
Yale and Harvard too, yes, and Stanford and a number of places. And these are significant movements, and a number of students on each of these campuses are working on these things. They should be connected because, like the ones in Quebec, they're also bound up with questions of austerity.
and a few of them arrested by the police for their radical
Right,
reactions on that.
Actually, some of that was covered by CNN up in Quebec initially, and then they showed the police cracking down and the students. And they show it when it meets their interest, I think, to show us, oh, look how violent it all is. And then suddenly blackout. You don't see very much happening.
I forgot to say, this is the flag of the province of Quebec behind us here. And it's just a kind of symbol calling your attention to what's going on there, which otherwise is getting almost no attention
Right.
in the American media.
Exactly right.
It's
Nothing
quite
now.
significant.
Yeah, there's nothing now.
And for people who are thinking of getting involved, there's always the possibility to sign up online and to get updated with new matters on these fossil fuel movements. So there's also an organization at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and yeah, if you just Google fossil fuels and University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, you should find more about that.
Good.
Now, I'm not even aware of what was going on this campus. I mean, are there people who are actually working on that actively
Yes.
on this campus?
Yes.
Good, good.
Very happy to hear it.
We need to give the NSA people something to do.
That's right, yeah. We're boring then. We want to be louder and funnier, yes. Karen, you have questions or comments on what you've heard so far?
Well, only that on Democracy Now! They interviewed, I can't remember his last name, his first name is Kevin. He's the author of the book Killing Trayvons. He is African American.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was pointing out the fact that the police are killing with impunity, not just black people. I mean, they're certainly more prevalently, and they're getting away with it easier, but they're also killing white people. It may not be getting as much notice. And one of the things, so for people who are complacent and think that this doesn't matter, it really does matter. And I think it's also important to note that Black Lives Matter is a movement that I hope continues to expand and grow. It may be, I would like to see them move in the same direction that the civil rights movement moved with Martin Luther King. I mean, he went beyond that regarding the anti-war movement. And so I would hope that the Black Lives Matter can be a conduit to that. sort of
Martin
thing.
King, certainly, but as Michael reminds us, there is an extremely important figure, a contemporary of Martin's, who needs to be recovered by a new generation
Yeah.
of Americans, and that's Malcolm X, a man who began, as Michael described him, and moved significantly throughout his life as a commentator on American politics, and ended up in a position as Martin King did, that what we were dealing with in this country was not even finally racism, although we certainly were dealing with that, but with a species of class oppression that produces war and oppression across the country, and that had to be dealt with as a whole. That was a political problem
Right.
for all of us, not just for one race or one group.
Exactly.
And, that's a history we need to recall and apply to our current situation. The book that Karen mentioned, Killing Trayvons, is edited and published by our friend Jefferson Clare from the website counterpunch.org. We recommend the book highly and recommend the things that are published every day on the site counterpunch.org, which is Catholic in its taste, lowercase c, universalist in its political concerns, and one of the few sites on the web where you actually do get a rather wide range of critical political opinions. Other comments? Let's see, David, you have comments you want to?
Yes, Ron, when you were talking about austerity in general, I mean, one thing that really struck me was the how you said, "Where is the money?" I think that's that's it in a nutshell. Where is the money? There's plenty of money out there. Don't let the powers that be in the corporate media try to tell you any differently. But where's the money going? I think you made a really good point, and you mentioned, well, of course, it's going to tax breaks for the wealthy and corporations. It's going to fund military spending. It's going to bail out banks and corporations, and also there's a systematic robbery of the public sector. Basically, trying to privatize more and more public schools, trying to privatize Social Security. Medicare is already being privatized in a very backhanded, sneaky way by using these managed managed care facilities instead of being directly administered by the state. They have these private companies that come and do the services that formerly unionized, well-paid state workers were doing, and instead they have low-wage workers with no benefits doing this work. It costs the state taxpayers more money, and it's providing less quality service. So, I mean, that's
Right.
privatization in a nutshell. The myth and the propaganda is that privatization is more efficient and saves the taxpayers money. It's just the opposite. In fact, when you're watching the corporate media, anything they tell you, pretty much believe just the opposite. And you'll be a lot better off. Seriously,
Reverse
I know
the
this is
science.
oversimplification, but if you believe just the opposite of what they say, you'll be more informed than if you believe everything they say.
Right.
Thank you, David. You're watching Aware on the Air. We have a few minutes left for comments. Michael, you want to comment on anything you've heard so far this evening?
If you believe anything that I've heard so far on this evening, yeah. If I'm taking what you said about the cuts in higher education, in any public services, maybe I can show an experience that I recently had. So also because professors' wages are cut, and I'm a student at the university, there's less possibility for lecturers are thinking to giving less classes. There's less supervision for students possible, a worse situation for students to get taught, and in the end we are cutting into our future, that is educated people who are able to do jobs, who are able to earn taxes, who are able to earn money for the future of this country. So as you pointed out, cutting into any kind of public services actually infringes, deters our, or I don't know how to phrase it well, but it worsens the future for us. It doesn't help us at all. And
Yes, indeed.
It ends growth and development, that's for sure.
I would like to pick up one thing that Karen, the theme of Karen's remarks on the China and the New Silk Road, and underline once again a resource that that we refer to frequently here, that is the writings of the Brazilian Pepe Escobar, writes for Asian Times Online and several other foreign, naturally, not American news sources. He's very worthwhile to read on these matters, on the question of Chinese economic integration. And the reason that that's important, and indeed not reported in the American media, is that that is a cynosure for American policy right now. U.S. policy is very concerned about the possibility of Eurasian economic integration as a contrast or as a challenge to the sort of worldwide economic control that the U.S. has essentially exercised since the Second World War. American planners are very conscious of that. That's the reason that the U.S. government has been so hysterical about Ukraine and has launched on the most amazing campaign of lies about Russian aggression in Ukraine that we've heard in some time. I mean, we haven't heard lies like this about American policy or by American policymakers, by the American government since the invasion of Iraq, probably. Although I suppose the Iranian situation has produced some similarities. But the stakes are higher in Eurasia. Stakes are higher in the attempt, the long-term attempt by the American government to make sure that a Chinese-Russian consortium, often referred to under the rubric of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, will be able to call the economic tune in Eurasia in a way that is seen to be limiting to the control that the American 1% have in the region. That's the reason that Putin has been made such a demon. That's the reason the U.S. is concerned about what the Pentagon delicately calls offshore control of China. Offshore control means making sure that China doesn't have access to the import of foreign oil. Russia has plenty of its own oil. China doesn't. And one of the reasons the association of Russia and China is such a threat to the U.S. is that the U.S. attempt to control worldwide energy flows is here to some extent undercut by the cooperation of Russia and China, by the economic integration of Eurasia. And the U.S. is willing to kill an awful lot of people to make sure that the economic integration of China doesn't take, the economic integration of Eurasia doesn't take place, to make sure that China's plans for the new Silk Road run into serious difficulties across the world. That's, and as I say, there are very few commentators writing about this, Escobar being one of the very best, one of the very few, and it's very important that what the real meaning of the pivot to Asia that the Obama administration has been talking about is. It's exactly that, preventing the economic integration of Eurasia for the profits of the American 1%. So it's a theme that we need to continue to talk about, and I'm very pleased that Karen continues to tell us about what's happening with that.
That's what I wanted to ask Karen about, is do you see some foreshadowing of an independent financial center in Asia, East Asia, and is that creating some panic in the higher circles in the USA?
Well,
there's another one, by the way,
yeah.
developing, some say, in Latin America, which would be independent of the American control of the globe that was imposed after
Right.
1945.
And there are connections.
Well, yes, the U.S. is not happy about it, that's for sure. I mean, they tried to get everyone to stay out of it, but now everyone's joining the AII, the Asian Independent, I can't think of the name of it now. They've asked everyone to stay out, but everybody's joining in. All of our allies are just pretty much snubbing their nose at us. I mean, China has the money, and they're going to use it, and they're going to use it wisely, I think. What Carl was referring to also, I want to mention that, yeah, and China's also going to be building a high-speed railway linking Beijing and Moscow. That's also very important. And it will cut the journey from 5 to 2 days. So these are, and it will be linking and going through Kazakhstan. And then, see, all of this, it isn't just about the railroad. It's about all of the development that will take place along the railroad and as a result of the railroad, and this whole EU, the free trade zone that they're looking at setting up between Russia, Belarus, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Armenia. And as I said, that's what they're looking at doing in Southeast Asia once they get all the MOUs or the contracts signed. So,
Do you see Greece turning to Russia for money?
yes, I think they've already met with Russia. Russia didn't, what Russia said, and now I like this, they said, we're not giving them a loan. We're going to do projects together so that they can profit from that. Now, I don't know any of the details, but I also see Greece supposedly was going to meet with China, with Xi Jinping in China in May, but they already met with Russia. So, yeah, I mean, that's why our, what is the word we want to use? What we have done is so counterproductive. We have spent billions on our military, on bombing, on killing people. We have spent millions on all of this covert operations, creating color revolutions, and creating enemies. So what we have done, we've taken people that we viewed as not enemies so much as competition or a challenge, and we've united them. I mean, how foolish is that? If we had just taken a more positive attitude and try to work with them. So I'm not sure where the U.S. is going from here. I really don't. I don't see.
You know what strikes me, Karen, is how the two different approaches between the United States and China have shown many times is that the people, and I say the United States, I don't mean the American people. I'm talking about the ruling class that controls our government and our economy at this point in time. How over the last 50, 60 years, their model is you either do what we want, or we're going to institute a coup against you, we're going to put economic sanctions against you, or we're going to come and just blow your country close to the Stone Age. And then we're going to come in and just take over and put in power whoever we want.
Right.
As opposed to China, who seems more to have the opinion like when they do business with someone, they want it to be a pleasant experience for both parties.
Right.
I mean, wow, what a concept! And any wonder why
Right.
the American empire, we're starting to see it's starting to crumble here.
Right.
I mean, it may take decades before it collapses. I mean, look at Rome. I mean, all big empires that are based on, first of all, an empire is counterproductive to a democracy. An empire must expand or die, and an empire inevitably always overexpands and then collapses. I mean, it's just inherent in the entire model. And what's interesting, in addition to what you said, both Ron and Karen, is also there's the BRICS economic bank,
Right.
which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which is interesting how fast some Western European countries like Germany and France have just wanted to join here real quickly. It's just and this whole thing with the new high-speed rails throughout all of Asia. I mean, this is phenomenal. I mean, this is going to be even larger than what happened in the United States in the 19th century with the expansion of the railroads. And we know, of course, that was one of the big economic engines in this country, because, as you pointed out, anywhere where in fact, you look at historical records here for Central Illinois during the 19th century, whenever the railroad went through, the highest farmland prices were the ones closest to the railways, and that's this is just bad news for the American people because of the incompetence and gangster mindset of our ruling class, but yet you look at Eurasia. I mean, it looks like there's lots of hope for the future, because they seem like they're doing smart things. High-speed rail, solar. Wow. What if we did that here? I mean, and stopped spending billions and trillions of dollars of killing people in other countries, interfering in other countries' affairs, and just focus on the American people and trying to make this a better, more civilized country. I mean, wow. Just think what could happen as far as spurring not only a better, decent society here, but the economic activity that could be spurred from it.
My only problem with this, David, is that we talk about these matters, and sometimes as if the problem is simply our leaders are being stupid or short-sighted, that they don't realize that it really would be different if they worked in a different way for the interests of all. I never have thought our leaders were stupid or short.
I never really implied that, Carl.
No, I know
bet
you
their
didn't.
actions
But
are stupid
I say
in general.
sometimes
Yeah.
that's the sort of conversation.
Yeah.
Our policy is wrong because we don't understand that it's important to try to make friends rather than to kill them or something like that. What in fact we see is an American policy remarkably consistent over generations, an American policy that works for the benefit of the
1%,
very few in America who control wealth and power. And in our own lifetimes, what's happened is that group has grown and concentrated, and the concentration of wealth in America has increased at an accelerating rate, so that wealth is in fewer and fewer people are able to control the actual politics of the United States. It finally makes very little difference what the majority of Americans think, because policy is not under their control. And this is the real, that's changed even in our own lifetimes. The sort of complaints about the Vietnam War, for example, that led to a change in American policy in regard to the war in Southeast Asia, is not quite so possible these days, because the government is not so malleable to the outrage coming from the public as a whole. The government spends a lot of time making sure that outrage doesn't get out of hand, that it's just a few soreheads like the ones you're listening to right now who are saying things like this. But still in all, they're less worried now than they were even a generation ago. The big political news this week, after all, is the announcement that Hillary Clinton is willing to become our president. Now, in fact, do we have here something that the United States is, as a community, is deciding on as policy that it's interested in? Good comment this week, and I I will quote here, by large margins, even in opinion polls conducted by the corporate-controlled media, the American people support sharp increases in taxes on the wealthy to fund social programs and provide jobs for the unemployed. They oppose cuts in Social Security and Medicare and view education, health care, and other public services as basic rights. They oppose government spying on the telephone and internet usage of ordinary Americans, as well as other police state measures, and they oppose overseas military interventions in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. The Democratic and Republican presidential candidates stand on the other side of the barricades on all these issues.
Yeah,
Both
it's interesting.
candidates
What we're
do.
going to get, apparently
Exactly.
from Congress, is a repeal of the estate tax.
Yes.
Just what we need.
Which the community is obviously calling for, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Which affects 0.2%
Yeah.
of the population.
Well,
For those with estates over 5 million, and so it's just,
But that's a perfect example of what we're talking
Yeah.
about, that policy is concentrated in fewer and fewer hands as wealth is, and therefore, when there actually is a tax change, the tax change turns out to help those people who have estates of more than $5 million, which
But what
nobody
will we-
here does.
What
perhaps.
will we focus on? We'll focus on, you know, Hillary's emails. We'll focus on
Well, what is she
Rindisi,
wearing?
or what is she wearing, or how her hair looks. Will we be focusing on policies,
And
Her
how,
track record.
track record, and policies?
and
Exactly.
how important it will be to have a woman president. Right?
Oh God, yes, that's another one. That's why I post dead giraffes, beautiful giraffes who've been killed by women with high-powered rifles. You know,
And look what it
smiling
did for
and posing
Britain
with
with
them.
Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah,
Boy,
well,
that
exactly.
that was really great
Yeah.
having a woman elected, wasn't
Right.
it?
I mean,
You
women
know?
can be every bit as brutal as men. Just give them the chance.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, jeez.
You've been
There's nothing
watching
to do with
Aware on the
gender.
Air, presented by members and friends of Aware, the anti-war, anti-racism effort of Champaign-Urbana, a local peace group, in the 16th week of 2015. Our show is produced and directed by Jason Liggett, thanks to whom also this program and others like it will be available on YouTube. And see the Facebook page for Aware for articles referred to by the panel and comments on what you've heard tonight. Finally, Aware honors those who reveal the crimes of the U.S. government, which the rest of the world knows about, but Americans don't. Manning, Assange, Snowden, and the rest, who are being persecuted by the Obama administration. Now, this is Carl Estabrook for Ron Zoke, Karen Evans-Levy, Stuart Levy, Karen Aram, Michael By, David Johnson, David Green, and other members and friends of Aware, saying in the words of the late Edward Murrow, good night and good luck.
This Saturday, April 18th, from noon until 8 p.m., come out to the State of Illinois Green Party Conference at the downtown Urbana Post Office Building, the Independent Media Center, and it's open to all the public.